welcome to another edition of Inside City Hall. My name is Frank Boyles. I'm the Prior Lake City Manager. Well, Prior Lake, as you may know or may not know, has 14 lakes and innumerable water bodies and a very definite concern for the purity of our water. And so we are fortunate to have the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District who serves our area, but also is housed within the city of Prior Lake City Hall itself. And I have a special guest today, Diane Lynch, who is the District Administrator of the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you on the program.
Great.
Last time we spoke was 3 years ago. You were advising me before we went on camera. My, how time flies.
It has. And I feel that I'm a little smarter than when you interviewed me the first time.
Is that right?
If I'd been there like a month.
So I'm probably a little dumber now at this point. And so, Diane, why don't you remind people about yourself a little bit? What's your background? How did you become to be District Administrator for the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District?
Well, I have a varied background, and it's not a straight path by any means, but
even better.
Yeah. So I started out primarily in planning. Right out of college, I had a speech communications background, and worked for telephone companies and helped them with communications issues with their customers.
Wow.
And after that, I ended up actually doing cold calling because I didn't want to do that anymore, and ended up talking to the president of the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce and told him what my background was. And he said, well, we don't have that, but we have a lobbying position open. And I laughed. I remember laughing because I said, well, I have no idea what that is. And furthermore, my parents were apolitical. I don't even know what party they supported. And he said, well, send me a resume anyway. So that started my foray into the lobbying field. And I lobbied for the public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector for over 17 years.
Wow.
It was something that I
various
really
levels
loved.
of government?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I really loved it. You get kind of hooked on it. And it's kind of like Las Vegas. You know, when you get inside, when you're inside of the Capitol, you kind of forget about the world around you because it becomes so focused on what's happening in the here and now there.
Sure.
So, but after I was doing that for a long time, there's of course a win and lose at the legislative process. And I felt like I wasn't being as effective as I wanted to be because I wanted to help people have lasting success. So how do we work together to have something that's going to last longer than this year you win on the bill, next year your opponents repeal it?
Right.
You know, so that's when I found out about mediation, and it was an area that I didn't have any knowledge of. One of my colleagues mentioned it, and I thought, oh, this is it. I can mediate in the public policy field, and I can feel that this is, a strength of mine, that I'm really doing the right thing, so to speak. So I took trainings all over the country and ultimately was marketing myself as a public policy mediator. But facilitation is also one of those different skill sets for helping to resolve disputes. And I found in public policy there was not a need for as formal of a situation as mediation, but more of an interest in facilitation work. So I did a lot of facilitation work, and it was primarily for water resource related organizations. So I worked for a number of engineering companies on wastewater treatment plants, for instance. I worked with cities on issues where they had projects that were very frustrating because they couldn't get them resolved, and help them with the citizen involvement piece. So I did that for quite a while, and found just by chance that there was an opening, this was the mid-'80s, at the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. And I thought, oh, this would be fun because it's water resource related. I'd be able to get more background in the field, and I could use my facilitation mediation background. And so I got the job as the district administrator, and I really loved the job. It was a lot of fun. It's a much larger watershed district than the one we have now. But little did I know, the drums didn't warn me that they were in the midst of major conflict. They were under fire by the Board of Water and Soil Resources for not meeting the needs of their constituency. So I spent the 2 years that I was there primarily dealing with conflict. And I was able to get involved in some projects. We had a really good engineering firm that helped out, but that was not quite what I had signed up for. So after that, I went back to mediation for quite a while, and doing projects again with in the technical field. and felt like, people that are on the other side of the table seem to be having more opportunity to get really steeped in water resources. So I thought, okay, I need to go back to school. So I went and got a master's degree in 2006. It's a science degree, it's conservation biology. So with that degree, I also had promised myself that when I was done with that, I would find other place to live besides Minnesota, because I'd never been anywhere else. And I got my networking going and actually ended up moving out to Portland, Oregon. And I was out there for about 3 years, worked with the Nature Conservancy. Was able to use that background, and but missed my family. My family didn't move out. My kids, you kind of think your kids are going to grow up and move out. No. My kids stayed. I was the one that moved out, so they had to follow me, but they didn't. They just visited. So I missed them a lot. So I came back and ended up working at Freshwater Society for about 5 years, and then thought, okay, it's time to move on. And Paul Nelson, who now works with the Scott WMO, used to be the district administrator of the district many years ago. And I thought, well, I'll check with him to see what he thinks. And I thought it was a good opportunity, so I applied and got the job.
Neat.
Yeah.
Outstanding. So, lobbying.
Yes.
Mediation. Facilitation. Did I miss anything? Those were kind of big three. How do you use those three as a district administrator? I'm assuming they've come in handy.
Oh, they have, actually. So with the facilitation work, of course, we just finished this 2-year flood study. I used some of my skill sets with that. I also use them with our Citizens Advisory Committee when I'm working with our Board of Managers, et cetera. Those things are universal, and they're good skill sets to have. As far as lobbying, I actually was able to use that as well, because in 2015, right after the flood, we realized that we needed to get some funding to help us do some of the work that we needed to have done. And the projects were estimated to cost about $1 million. And the district's budget is small. We didn't have that money sitting waiting for us to use it. Right. And the Federal Emergency Management Administration requires you to do the upfront funding of projects. So it's like, well, we need some money here. So we hired a lobbyist, and we put a bill together, and I was actually able to take that around and lobbied different senators and representatives, worked with other groups, and we ultimately got about $750,000 in a bill. It was the bonding bill. One of the bonding bills that passed. The ones, the last year didn't pass, and this doesn't look like one's going to pass this year. But and we were able to get the funding we needed from the Department of Natural Resources. So that's sitting there waiting for us to use it, and we have to pay it back once FEMA pays us, and then we pay it to the DNR. But so I've used all those skill sets.
Terrific. Education pays off, doesn't it? So. Going back to lobbying, because some people hear that term lobby.
Yes.
And there are certain visions they get that aren't maybe as wholesome as they should be, right?
Yeah.
What is lobbying when it comes right down to it, since someone's got to be asking?
Sure. Lobbying is simply, I think a lobbyist is kind of a surrogate between the client or the organization you're representing and the legislative process. So you're there to make sure that what the organization you're representing wants is able to work through the process. So a lobbyist puts together usually committees that determine what type of legislation they would like to impact. So either they write legislation, try to repeal legislation, or just be active on legislation, bigger topics, so that they can feel like they're weighing in on something. That ends up in a legislative platform of some type, and that is usually what that lobbyist has to carry to the legislature. Now, lobbyists can be representing organizations and be an employee, but they also can be hired by there's lobbyists that represent their clients from engineering firms, for instance, and there's lobbyists who have their own association management firms, and they have number of clients that they represent. But you're going to the legislature. It's really important that you know who are the members on the committee. You need to know where they're from, what their interests are, what they've done on legislation previously, and then you make appointments with them, or you catch them in the hallway to try to get some information from them, and then also give information to them. And one of the really important keys to be a good lobbyist is you have to be trustworthy, accountable, and if you say you're going to do something to a legislature, you better do it, because they remember if you didn't. And it's working both sides. I used to actually, when I worked for the Chamber of Commerce many years ago, when I actually started lobbying, I did a training for business people. Business people were always very critical of the legislature, but they didn't know how the legislative process worked. And unless you know that, you can't impact it. So we did a play, and we had the lobbyist coming in with a suit, and by the time the lobbyist was done, the tie was cut, the hair was messed up, the jacket was ripped. It's like, that's what happens to you, and that's what happens to legislation. You really don't know going in what's going to come out at the other end, kind of like sausage. And the lobbyists used to have a saying, either life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature is in session. And so, but you do the best you can. One of the things that I've noticed through the years, and now being more of an observer, is that it's really important to work with other organizations. So those legislators are expecting you have done your fact checking and you've touched bases with organizations so that you're coming in more as a group rather than just representing one organization.
Because otherwise it's going to be fragmented.
Yes, absolutely.
You're going to support it. I may oppose it. This other guy, the legislature can't deal with it.
Right. Yeah, and they have tons of information they have to read, and
and you're being an interpreter to some extent.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And they've got to be able to rely on what you've said, because if your fact is wrong, it's going to be coming out of their mouth as if it's them. Credibility goes to heck.
Exactly. Yes.
So let's talk about watersheds. Is it state statute that establishes watersheds? How do they? Cities. I can tell you, Minnesota Chapter 412. That's what creates cities. Is there a similar kind of statute for watershed districts?
Yes, there is a statute that creates watershed districts, and the actual a watershed is actually an area, it's topographical, based upon where water flows. So we are a watershed district. We are a water management organization within that watershed. And that's why it's called the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District, because we cover a bigger area. And as you know, we represent 5 cities. It's not only Prior Lake, which is the biggest part of our district, but it's also Shakopee, it's Savage, it's Shakopee, Metawakan Sioux Community, it's townships, Spring Lake Township, and Sand Creek Township. So we have a large constituency that we represent, and that's because watershed districts go beyond the boundaries of the, that are drawn up as far as cities go, because it's really protecting those water resources. And watershed districts are administered by a board of managers. Our watershed district has 5. Other watershed districts have more than that.
Oh, they can have more?
They can have more, yes.
Can they have less?
I think they can. And they are appointed by a county, so they don't have to run for elected office. And their roles and responsibility, as well as my role as an administrator and the role of a watershed district in general, is regulated by statute. The agency that really watches over us is the Board of Water and Soil Resources. We have to be accountable to them. For instance, coming up next month, I have to write an annual report and tell them everything we did in the previous year. That organization is also excellent because we do have the ability to levy taxes, but it doesn't cover everything, and so we're able to apply for grants. And the Board of Water and Soil Resources is one of the state agencies that's administering clean water grants. And we're able to work with them. If we write a good proposal, we're able to get money to fund our projects.
And you are eligible to grants that cities are not.
Yes.
And so that's the makings for a nice little collaboration.
Oh, it's great.
And we've done that a lot.
We have, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you.
For the benefit of our entire watershed district.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got 5 members, managers of the Board of Managers, right? Are they kind of like a city council for the watershed district? I mean, are they policymakers? Are they power of the purse people? That sort of thing?
Both, yes, they are. And I would say that that's true. They're probably similar. We don't have the type of issues coming up before our board as you do in the city. Primarily, we don't do very much permitting. We have an agreement with the city of Prior Lake. to do permitting for us. So if there's a project that the city does, then we get involved. Or, for instance, for the city of Savage, we just have a small part of Savage. But if there's permitting that's needed there, we do the permitting for them because we don't have that type of agreement.
Right.
So the managers, basically, we have a meeting just once a month. I know you have a couple of meetings a month.
Sure.
We don't have committees per se. We have focus groups that get together, ad hoc committees on topics as we need to.
Right.
But we primarily talk about projects. We talk about issues that are facing watershed districts. We talk about, like, for instance, the buffer law that is coming down the pike. And one of the things that watershed districts have to decide is whether or not they're going to enforce the buffer rule. And it's
what is that?
The buffer rule?
Yeah.
Okay, it's ditch. It's public ditches need to have a certain amount of protected property around a ditch, so that
Because they go up and down with the water?
Yeah, and because
that sort of
stormwater
thing?
runs into them,
Yeah.
and which of course runs into
Surge,
water bodies.
and then it dries back
Right.
up.
Yeah,
that
and
sort of thing?
I believe on a public ditch it has to be 16 feet, and so
Okay.
that's a substantial amount of area. In our watershed district, I believe we only have like 4. I think that there are probably farms that need to have buffers that don't already have them. One of the things that our colleagues at Scott County said, you know what? This buffer law is new, but most of our county landowners have already done what they needed to do to protect the water. So that's a really good thing. So we're going to be talking about that actually in our March meeting.
So when you protect the water, this buffer, does it mean you shouldn't have this sort of soil in there that can just be carried away with the water? Is that
Yeah,
one thing
and
you're
certainly
trying to do?
buffers are actually, you're right, to retain the soil on the banks. You want
Right.
to keep it there. And yes, sedimentation is really bad, not only for silting in the Minnesota River, which is where it goes ultimately,
Right.
but also it carries different pollutants with it in the particles right down to the river as well.
Okay. So, we got the 5 managers, then
Yep.
we have a staff.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the staff and kind of how they're organized.
Yeah.
And I think you've got a number of interns as well that help you during peak season, as it were,
Yeah.
summer season.
Yeah, yes, as you do too. We have 4 permanent staff and 1 temporary staff. We have a administrative assistant. Then we have 1 person that primarily is our monitoring and research person. That's Jamie Rockney. Then we have a project director, and that's Maggie Karshnia. And she gets involved on specific projects as they come along, which is different than a monitoring and research. Monitoring and research is involved in a number of areas, doing sampling, doing vegetation surveys, doing flow measurements, et cetera. But Maggie actually focused specifically on projects. And then the temporary person that we have is terrific, and she's been able to really work in all the different fields, but she's primarily working with Maggie on monitoring our conservation easements. We have a lot of them, I think about 40 in the district, and
I'm surprised it's that few. Frankly.
well, yeah,
That's a
but
lot.
unfortunately, the previous administrations haven't felt that it was a priority to monitor them.
Right.
And so landowners, unbeknownst to them in many cases, were putting basketball courts in there,
nice.
and or tool sheds or whatever,
Right.
and it's like, that is supposed to be protecting the wetland resource, for instance. And if you have a hard surface, the water's just going to run off and get pollutants and go into your water.
And even the city can have some.
Yes,
Because I know
absolutely.
I've gotten letters from you guys saying, hey,
yeah.
we got what is it called again?
A conservation easement.
We have a conservation
Right.
easement here.
Yeah.
You're doing this, and this, or someone is.
Right.
Can you kind of see to it that doesn't happen, or
Yes.
does happen, or what have you?
Right. Yeah, and your staff has been great. And again, oftentimes you don't know that's happening because we hadn't previously been doing a good job of, policing it, so to speak. So.
Is that a large part of the responsibility, or just one?
Oh
of many,
no, that's
many?
just one. Yeah. Maggie right now is working with your staff on some projects that are going to protect the Lower Prior Lake, and Lower Prior Lake has really great water quality. It's not impaired for nutrients, which is what is impairing Upper Prior and Spring Lake.
Right.
And nutrient impairment, unfortunately, results in algae growth and the growth of nuisance plants.
Right.
It's something that we have been told by the Municipal Pollution Control Agency that we have to fix it. So we have to get the pollutant level down to a certain point.
Right.
And as in order to do that, you have to do projects.
Yep.
And so for Lower Pryor, we just finished Fish Point Park, which is right by Lower Pryor, and that one involved prairie plantings, putting in a detention basin, putting in an iron sand filter, doing a lot of work, and we work side by side with your staff on that. And that one, we hope ultimately is going to reduce pollutant to Lower Pryor by, I think, 22 parts per million. So, and so what's happening is the pollutants are caught and they just stay there. They don't wash off and go into the lake. We finished another project dealing with Lower Pryor, and we've got Fairlawn Estates. That's another project that we're going to be working on with you. So those all have been possible through the Clean Water Grant money that I mentioned, as well as participation from you as a partner and us. So we give our in-kind support, and then we also give financial support to the projects to make sure they happen.
And we've already established that you have certain grants that you can get access to that we can't.
Right, yes.
So it gives us combined leverage because they're normally matching, aren't they, in some form?
Yes, they are. We like the ones where it's a quarter match, so that we're matching 25 and they're doing 75. But there are plenty of out there that's 50-50, and we don't prefer those. But
sure.
Maggie is also doing a lot of work with carp management, and that's something that
Now, what is carp management?
carp management, yes.
Card or carp?
Carp, C-A-R-P.
Oh, them.
Carp, yes,
oh, yeah.
them.
Walleye.
Yes, the common carp. And those carp are actually something to be respected, I have to say. They're very wily. They can live a long time. There was one pulled out of Starring Lake in Eden Prairie that was 75 years old.
Oh, man.
They can grow.
How do you figure that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not a
you
fish
count
biologist.
the rings.
They can grow to very large sizes, 30, 40 pounds. They propagate very quickly. They, unfortunately, eat all the good vegetation in the lake, so native fish populations don't do well.
Yeah.
They also are bottom feeders, so
Stir up everything, do they?
yes, all the sediment that's at the bottom of the lake, which has phosphorus in it, is brought up into the water column. So they put it up there again, and of course, if you've got algae out there, it'll grab a hold of the phosphorus and it'll start to bloom. So carp are really responsible for damaging the water quality of many of the metropolitan lakes. And all of us through the years have just done piecemeal work. So, okay, we'll do a seine here and we'll do a carp tournament there, and but nothing really comprehensive. And Maggie wrote a proposal to get a comprehensive grant, Clean Water Grant from the Pollution Control Agency. And that not only does the seining, it also, we put radio transmitters on fish so we know where they are. And we know where they're going, we know where they're going to be spawning. And what you want to do is you want to stop that movement.
Before that happens.
Exactly. So you want to put fish barriers up, but you can't do it willy-nilly because you're going to waste your money. Some of these barriers cost $5,000.
I think, yeah.
Yes, but if you know where they are, you can make the determination of what's needed and when. We just had a big seining in Spring Lake. It's with ice, so the fishermen put the net, which is a huge net, through the ice. We were able to get out 17 tons of fish. Pardon me?
How do you draw? Are you drawing
by
it
hand.
down? Or?
They put it down and they draw it back by hand. Wow. It's all handwork, and which
a lot of work.
And so they're pulling in over 3,000 fish by hand through the ice, and no wonder each seining costs about $5,000. It's manual labor.
And this is tons of fish.
Tons of fish.
Right down to it.
Yeah. Now we have had some cases where it hasn't been so successful.
Right.
So, for instance, we were in Arctic Lake a couple years ago, and we know there's fish in there. It's a really deep lake, but when we did the seine, we got 12 carp. 12. Wow. And a lot of the other fish were exactly. A lot of the other fish were native, and you have to throw those back.
Of course. Sure.
But so you never know. However, the reason why we were so successful on Spring is we had some tagged fish who were the ones that showed us where the fish were. So we could tell where they were, and we could see where they were congregated up. So those fish, when we pulled them in from the net, they got to go free again because they're going to do the same thing.
Stoolies.
Exactly, Judas fish. So, yeah. So that's made it much more scientific, you know, in the approach.
Yeah.
So
they're going to get wily one of these days. They will outcrowd the one with the transmitter.
That's right. You stay away from me.
Exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah.
You can go in the other lake.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Yeah,
And so that does work out well to be able to locate them. You have to use some level of technology
absolutely, yeah.
to beat these guys
at
their own game.
Well, and one of the things that I found fascinating, so what a lot of people do when they see carp, it's like, oh, it's a rough fish. They just throw it out on the lawn and it dies. But there's actually a market for when you have a large haul like we had. And so the fishermen actually sold the big fish to a place in North Carolina. And so they had a big truck which had water in it. So they could keep them alive all the way down. Yeah.
Neat.
Yep.
What do they do? Minnesota walleye?
Don't know. But you know what?
I
I don't know if you knew this or not, but Pete Young, your water resources engineer, said, okay, he kept saying, well, I'm going to smoke them for you. And it's like, okay, now put your money where your mouth is. He got 6 carp. They are great, aren't they?
They are very
and
good.
I thought if someone hadn't told me, it would have been like salmon, you know. And so no wonder people are liking them. But they're a little harder to fillet, I understand, because of the bone structure. But
so are northerns.
Oh, there you go.
A lot of people throw them back, too. Okay, so we talked about the board, the managers, and by the way, they have terms, right? I mean, they're appointed by the county.
They have 3-year terms, and they're staggered.
Okay.
Yes.
And what are some of the biggest challenges from a board member's perspective? Some of the biggest issues that they deal with? I know you had the entire question of, do you do the alum treatment in Spring Lake? And that was a huge decision because the money was
$500,000,
big time, right?
Right, yes. I think one of the biggest challenges is setting priorities. You know, there's
so much work to do.
Oh, exactly, and not enough money,
and
not enough staff to be able to do it. So I think that's probably one of the keys, and also the learning curve. You know, unless you have been in the water resources field before, we kind of speak a foreign language. And the staff put together an acronym list. So to help,
boy.
And I'm sure you face that similar with city council members. You're so used to the vernacular, but they're not.
Right.
So it's kind of getting up to speed. It's also feeling comfortable, I think, in sharing the knowledge that they have in the professions that they've been in. We do have 3 retirees, and we have 2 that still work. And the backgrounds are all different. And each of them brings something of great value to the Watershed District Board, and it's having so that they feel they have enough information to be confident to be presenting that information as we're dealing with all these challenges.
Right.
We have a water management plan that is basically our city ordinance, if you will. It tells us how we act. It identifies projects. It indicates what our water quality goals are, what our water quantity goals are, and you do it every 10 years. We did an update in 2013 because of the alum treatment.
Sure.
But we have to do another one in 2019.
Nice.
So we're going to start working on it heavily in 2018, and that takes a lot of work. And as you do with comprehensive plans, you have to think, boy, what do we want to be in 10 years? Right. That's a long time to try to determine where you're going to be at and what the priorities are going to be.
And it seems simple.
Oh.
And it becomes more complex.
Oh,
you can't
absolutely.
control, as you said, all the variables.
Yep.
Now, so the watershed managers are paid? Are not paid?
They're paid per diem.
Okay,
so
there's a per diem amount.
And that's set by the legislature as well, and it's a $75 per diem per day. So if they go to 3 meetings, the max they get is $75.
Wow.
Our board, however, wanted to be even more frugal, and so they said, okay, it's $75 a day for board meetings, but for other things like they have liaison appointments with other local government entities in the area. And when they go to those, it's $40 that they get paid, not the $75.
Well, that's really something.
Yes.
And these guys are working all the time, I presume. I see them circulating around here from time to time. They've got a workshop. They've got a regular meeting. They come to see city council meetings because there might be information that's important to them.
Yes.
So these are active people.
Yeah, and if it weren't for the managers, it would be really hard to be an administrator, because you need to be paying attention to what's going on around you, and I can't be everywhere.
Right.
And you know how it is when you're in a meeting. It's like, okay, so you have 2 hours of work for every meeting that you're in. It's like you never get that done.
Right.
So I'm delighted that they're committed to do this, and I hear things from them before I read it in the paper, which is great. And one of them is great about doing inspections and said, that there's a tree down in the channel and whatever.
Sure.
And we don't know that unless we're
Eyes
out
and
there.
ears, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's very helpful. I am really pleased. We have a board of managers that gets along really well, and so we're working all
That's
together.
important.
Yes.
You can spend an awful lot of time on personality issues.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's
yeah.
good
Yeah.
that they work. So the stormwater management and flood mitigation study, or your flood study, that's been a significant effort of yours. What were the major findings? Is it done? First of all, it's all done, isn't it?
Thankfully,
or is
it is done. It is done. It took a year longer than we had hoped. So this is a joint project with the City of Prior Lake and the Watershed District, and in collaboration with Spring Lake Township. And the goal of the flood study was essentially to revise our model. So our model was outdated.
Tell people what
model
kind of model
is software, and it
Okay.
tells you what the impact of different
So if
rain
it rains
levels
2
are.
inches,
Right.
it's going to
Right.
bring this up to that.
Exactly.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
where would
Thank
that
you.
where would that happen?
And why do you have to update models?
Oh,
Why-
because the information that you need to put in the models changes dramatically, especially because if you believe that there's some type of climate change occurring, which certainly a lot of the experts believe that there is, you have to incorporate that information. So Atlas 14 information, for instance, is something that everybody's using to kind of gauge what's happening with weather. And you have to input that information into the model so that it's realistic, it's up to date as best you can have. So we needed to do the model.
Yeah.
We needed to figure out, okay, so what are the different ways we can address flooding so that we don't go through what we did in 2014 again. And I can tell you a little bit more about how we went about that. And the third thing is that we needed to figure out, where are we going to go with this? What are the things that we really need to focus on? And we needed to put an implementation plan together. In the process of that, there were so many different routes that we went. We had a really robust public outreach portion.
Right.
So we had a technical advisory committee. We had advisory group meetings where we got together with representatives of different associations and different local government units and told them what was happening, got their feedback. Ultimately, we ended up with a list of 21 ideas. People thought, okay, so what if you just take the excess water and put it in the aquifer? What if you put a dam on Spring Lake? All these different things. And we hired Bar Engineering jointly, and Bar Engineering's job was to take that new model and run the numbers and say, okay, so what are the options that look the most feasible?
Of these 21?
Of the 21,
Okay.
right. And so
Thank
we
you.
didn't test all 21. We
Right.
looked at them all, and we said, okay, so how would it impact the flooding event? How much effort would it take? Is it legal to do this? Who would we have to get permission from? How much would it cost? Just all those different factors.
Right.
So we whittled it down to, I believe, 6. And then of those 6, we whittled it down to 3. And the 3 that we chose, and we had 2 very important meetings with the policymakers
Yep.
from the 3 entities, were, what we want to do is enhance protection, which is using the emergency management plan that you have with Scott County now and adding information to it that you actually ended up doing in 2014. And if you had foresight, you could have done it better. Now you
Right.
have
Now we do.
hindsight. Yes, yeah, and you can figure it out.
Sure.
So that's enhanced protection, and that's a really important piece, so that the citizens of Prior Lake know what to expect. When will they be able to get sandbags? What route should they go? What's protected as far as access to their homes, et
Where
cetera.
are the more sensitive areas, where the least sensitive
Exactly.
areas, et cetera,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
And households, I guess, when
Yeah.
it comes down to it.
Yeah. And the second thing was we needed to focus more on the having flexibility with the low flow gate. Now the low flow gate,
So that's the channel
that's
and
the outlet structure.
weir. Is it weir? Is that
It's
the
a
right
weird,
word?
yep,
Okay,
yeah.
thank
So
you.
what that's all about is the outlet structure, which was redesigned in 2010, has it's always open. I mean, we can close it if we absolutely have to, but it's always open, and it's at 902.5 feet above
That's
sea level.
you're regulated on
Yes,
that one,
yeah,
right? You
yes.
can't. Is it over? You can't do something or under?
Under.
Under. Thank you.
Yes, and so we have a low flow gate, however, that we have to get permission from the Department of Natural Resources in order to open it.
Okay.
And that will give us a half a foot. That's not a whole lot, but if you're anticipating storms coming in, you can get the water out a little faster. Our current manual with the Department of Natural Resources, which was in 2006, basically says we can only open the low flow gate in anticipation of snowmelt, and we have to get their permission, but that's typically spring. Well, in 2015, we opened it twice, and in the fall and late fall. So that was in spring. And so the DNR said, okay, you guys are opening this more often. You better revise that manual. And of course, it needed to be revised anyways. Yeah. But we're revising it now, and we're putting together some type of a procedure on what are those different things that we need to take into account before we open the low flow gate. And for instance, one of the things you have to do is you have to check to see if the different places that will hold water have any capacity to hold more water. That's a really important piece. Looking at a long-range forecast from NOAA, National Oceanographic and Environmental Administration, I guess it is.
Sure.
What their forecast is. Are we going to be getting a lot of rain? What do we know about the lake levels? We constantly monitor the lake levels of Prior Lake at the lower Prior Lake level and Spring Lake. We know what they're doing. Where are they? I mean, are they high going into the, whatever season it is? And so all those different things we have to take into account. And we're hoping that we can get a procedure put together that is based on science and has the support of the Department of Natural Resources and is something that we can use when citizens call up, as they often do, and they have this year already. When you're going to open the low flow gate?
I'm sure.
We can say we have a procedure to follow. We have followed that procedure. Thumbs up, it says, yeah, we can open it. Thumbs down, not quite yet. The situation isn't, that we can do that now. Right. So we want to have this to be much more, that we can calculate when it's going to happen.
Right.
So.
And you can be more aggressive.
Absolutely.
In circumstances that justify that,
yes.
or maybe not.
Exactly.
So when you say low flow gate, does that mean that you can take the water from 902.5 down to 902?
Correct.
Can you take it from 902 to
No, you
1.5?
can't go lower.
No, that is the low flow. That you've got a half a foot, basically, you can play with.
Yeah, and what its limiting factor is the size of the pipe, the water that's going out. So the pipe was built for 65 cubic feet per second to go out. I think the most we got during the flood was about 58 cubic feet per second. The water was coming in at a much higher level than that, but there's only so much you can get out. And so the capacity is really what's, like I say, your limiting factor. And one of the things that we looked for in the flood study was, should we put another pipe right next to the existing pipe? Right. Now, people that have lived in this area for a long time know the battles that we had in order to get that first channel in.
Right.
And it was very difficult getting the easements. It was very expensive. And one of the reasons why that's not one of the recommendations is because we feel that it would be probably nearly impossible to get all the easements, to get the property rights from people, and to get go through all the regulatory agencies to get that done. It would be very costly to get it done, and so there's other options that we felt were much more appropriate for us to move forward on. And then that third option, which is my favorite, very honestly, because the first two, of course, are short-term. Right. Those are things we're working on right now. You're working on your plan, and we're working on our manual to change that so we can open that low flow gate on a regular basis. And that is storage and the upper watershed. So it is really important that we try to keep the water where it's falling, rather than having it go down into this area, and the lakes become full, and it goes down our Prior Lake outlet channel. Now the outlet channel is 7 miles, goes to the Minnesota River, is considered a stormwater conveyance, so it's like a relief valve. So it's taking that extra water because Spring and Priors are landlocked, but it can only take so much away. And when you get to that point where the lake levels are going up because there's a lot of water coming in. If we can keep the water in the upper watershed, we're not going to have that much of an issue.
Hold it a little longer.
Hold it
is
in
that
longer.
the thought? Yeah.
Yep. And ultimately, we had like 10 pilot sites that we looked at, and they were just sites that if we were able to get permission and we were able to put in barriers, etc., what would we get? Well, we thought we'd get about 15 inches of stormwater storage. That's huge.
Yeah.
But we know that that's not possible, and we hadn't even talked to any of those landowners there because it was just using modeling to see. But we had a upper watershed, subwatershed assessment done a few years ago by the Scott County Soil and Water Conservation District. And they've identified where we can have some best management practices. Some of them include wetland restoration. And we know one of the wonderful things of a wetland is it stores water. It holds it for you.
Sure.
There are certainly areas in the upper watershed that are low-lying and that farmers know they're always in the spring. They're going to be wet. They can't plant crops there.
Right.
We can work with them on that. We are looking for the opportunity to say, okay, that's unusable to you. How about if we pay it we can put a structure in there, and if we need it, we can hold that water back.
Right.
Also on agricultural land that is farmable, if there's maybe a low-lying spot where they can put a crop in, but sometimes they lose their crop because of the weather conditions, we can say to them, you know what, this is a perfect place for us to put in a control structure. If we get a large rain event and we have to close it off to hold the water there and you can't plant, we will pay you for what you would have had there. Mm-hmm. With the crop that you would have had. In 2014, a lot of the farmers in the upper watershed flooded out, and they flooded their cropland and also the land where they had forage for their cattle.
Right.
And so they had to buy it elsewhere. And so we want to be there to say this is a win-win. If you can work with us to set some of these areas aside, we would love that opportunity. And it's something that we have to work with people that are interested in doing it. We're not going to force this on anyone.
Right.
But it's something that's going to take a longer period of time. We are working on a site right now. We're just in the preliminary aspects of just looking at it. So is this going to give us the kind of storage the model indicated it would? Who are the landowners that we have to contact about this? What do we think? Do we think that they might be interested in this? And it would take probably at least 3 years from now to get something put in, at the very least, because you've got to put a feasibility study together. You have to get permission. You have to involve the state agencies. There's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. But when I look back at the Watershed District when it was first formed in, I believe it was 1980, we were formed because of flooding issues. So it's been a challenge ever since then of trying to manage the flow of water. And so I don't think we can kick the can down the road anymore, because as we do that, areas develop, then we lose the opportunity to do some of this flood storage. So, we really, the managers are totally committed to trying to find some sites so we can get moving on this. Yeah. But they want the sites to be ones that will protect water quality as well, because our two major, as I indicated, our two major directives are we're going to protect water quality of our resources as well as manage the flood or the water quantity.
Right. And then did we learn as part of this study, or maybe it's relearned, the impacts on the farmer? Because we talk about storage up there and we think, yeah, that should be easy.
Right.
And then we find out that, oops, when we put the water in an area that they were otherwise farming, it sucks the nutrients out of that soil, right? And so that has an impact. You talked about the silage. You talked about there are longer term impacts than we really understood to start with.
Sure.
And so that might have changed the area now that we're looking at. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, I guess I actually wasn't familiar with that issue about impacting the nutrients, but certainly there are farmers that have tiling, which is designed to take water off their land.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that we got when we had a meeting with the farmers in the upper watershed was, well, if you put a water control structure here to stop the water, my tile's going to back up on my land, so it's going to flood out my land.
Sure.
And so one of the things that is a part of this study that we'd have to do with any site is to look at the hydraulics. If we stop water here, where is it going to back it up? And so we don't want to back it up. We want to make sure that this is a well-working machine. That if we stop it here, then we have to work with someone up here. And I'm committed to doing the work that we need to do to get these areas identified and to work with people that are interested in working with us on them. And I think they're out there. I know that the Watershed District has tried this before in a number of iterations and haven't been successful. Right. But maybe we haven't been asking the right questions, or we haven't been offering the right alternatives. And and we want the farmers to tell us what is it they need.
It's got to be good all the way around.
Exactly,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
I don't want to do something for you unless it's kind of goes back and forth.
Absolutely.
So those are a number of different projects. You talked about the CARP project. We certainly talked about the Allen project. Talked about the project, the storage, and the priorities. Other projects that you've been engaged in, as if though I know those are plenty. I don't want to suggest anything.
Oh, yeah.
You had the highway way back.
Oh,
Highway
yes.
13 ditch, right?
Yep,
And tell us a little about that.
Yeah,
what was that about? And why did you go about doing that?
Okay, so that's that actually is an area where a lot of the water from the upper watershed comes in, and it's full of nutrients. And so we put in a ferric chloride plant right there on the south side of County Road 13. And what that does
is... You can see it from the road,
You can
right?
see it from the road, yes. Yeah. And it goes down a channel, and what it will do is inject ferric chloride in the water, which will capture the nutrients, the phosphorus, like an alum treatment does.
I see.
And we've got it the water directed so that there is an overflow. So during the flood, we had some water that wasn't getting treated because there was simply too much coming down.
Yeah.
But when the water levels are lower, there's an injection site that's approved by the Pollution Control Agency where we inject the water and then it goes to a holding pond.
Okay.
So the ferric chloride takes the phosphorus and drops
grabs it.
Yep, and drops it to the bottom of the pond. And certainly, just like anything else, it's going to silt in, and we're going to have to remove that at some point. But we actually just looked at that last year and determined we don't have to dredge it yet.
Right. Well, it's been happening for hundreds, thousands of years, right? That sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And yet we're now taking advantage of that for our collective benefit, it seems to me.
We had 1217 wetland, which is a project that we...
I'm familiar with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we worked with you on that.
Okay, well, I should be familiar.
And that is a project that resulted because of the county doing a major alignment of the road there, 12 and 17.
Right.
And so...
yes, okay, I know exactly what you're talking about. Sorry.
So it's there's three different cells in the wetland, so at each juncture, there's more and more treatment going to the water. We've also got carp barriers in there, because, of course, those wily carp kind of come up and they get into those ponds, and they love it because...
Oh, I suppose. No one's going to bother me here.
Exactly, yeah. And then they'll spawn there, and it's like, well, we don't need more of you guys.
No.
We're trying to cut down on it. And we also did restoration of prairie there. And so this year, actually, we're talking about doing a burn for the first time. So burns are really helpful because they get the weeds that just invariably grow up with the natural vegetation, because the natural vegetation isn't strong enough. So we want to give that natural vegetation a chance to get stronger by doing a burn.
So and a burn kind of restarts Mother Nature.
Yes,
right?
it does. Yeah, and there's seed banks. Yeah, and there are seeds that are waiting there. But yes, they're waiting for the bad guys to clear out so that they can pop up.
Yeah.
yeah.
And we've gotten a lot of information on that from the SMSC and the
Yeah.
folks they have on their staff.
Yes.
What kind of upcoming projects? That's a heck of a load of projects, but what kinds of upcoming projects do you see yourself being engaged in?
Well, we're still involved in Lower Pryor
Sure.
projects, and those we're going to be working on until
think-
2018.
Do you think most people know what lower and upper and why does it seem upside down?
Yeah,
Lower
probably
is upper
not.
and upper
Yeah,
is lower?
yeah.
Do you want to explain that a little bit?
I actually don't know if I can explain why. I can just say that
I think
that
it's just-
lower is actually, when you look at a map, it's the upper
Right.
part of the lake, and it's reversed. And so,
Based on the flow, isn't it?
the flow goes. I don't know though why it was called.
Yeah, I don't either.
The lower was in the upper quadrant, but
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Because the
So-
water hit that second. I don't know. Maybe.
But what I think is really interesting, though, is Lower Pryor has been able to maintain good water quality, and it's, it flows. It comes from Upper Pryor, so a lot of the
It's all connected,
It
right?
is all connected. So, there is they call them treatment trains.
Uh-huh.
So we've got the ferrochloride site that catches the nutrients there. Then we have, we have Spring Lake,
Spring Lake
that's
alum.
and the alum treatment, catching more of the nutrients. Then we go into Upper Pryor, and we had a number of projects with Upper Pryor, which were cost share projects, best management practice projects. And those help keep the nutrients there, and then it flows into Lower Pryor, where the water quality is really good. And we're trying to keep it there by having projects for Lower Pryor.
Sure.
So it's, like you say, it's all connected. And with the upper watershed storage, we want to make sure we're also protecting water quality. So we're keeping some of that phosphorus away from the stream. And you can't, that's one of the things with the carp management. You can't just say, oh, we're just going to do this little bit here.
Right.
It's all connected.
Connected system.
Right. We need to deal with it all.
And it's a huge system.
It
so
is.
all you can do is chip away here,
Right.
and
Yeah.
when the opportunity and the money and all those things
Right.
are there and available.
Right.
So-
Another project, of course, is we're trying to finish up all the damage from the 2014 flood. And it's all
I
got to be
bet you
done.
people are surprised to hear that. 2017, here we are.
Oh, I know.
And
we're still
there's
working
things-
on it. Yeah, and that's because the projects were so big. And actually, the FEMA folks that we had here, we actually had two teams of FEMA folks, and the second team was really much more helpful than the first. And
Right.
so we
And
got
those are federal folks, emergency management.
right. Yep.
Okay.
That were here temporarily, and the second team of people were much more helpful in helping us figure out how to repair the damage along the outlet channel, which with the first team, they weren't interested in helping us with that. It's like, well, that's where most of the damage is. So
Were
we
they
got
more record keeping or concerned about record
well, yeah,
keeping
and
the first
basically
group?
they didn't understand our outlet channel. Very honestly, that's the bottom line. They didn't understand how it worked.
Gotcha.
And so we got started a little bit late, and then it's the matter of getting all these projects in line.
Right.
And we had to clear out the down trees first,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of them in that 7 mile
I
area.
imagine.
And once you got rid of the down trees, then we had to do the culverts. We had culvert damage, one that blew out and one that needed repair, and then we had a bank on Pike Lake that
Right.
needed
I was
to be.
just thinking about
yeah,
Pike
yeah,
Lake and the work
yeah.
you've done there.
Yep, and we had to get all those done. Then we have that sediment delta, which is what we call segment 5, which is in Shakopee. That unfortunately is taking longer because we have this thaw that looks like it's going to continue, and we can't get the equipment in there. It's too
Which
heavy.
you kind of relied on.
We did,
right?
yes, and we actually were going to do this project last year,
Yeah.
and we found out at the very last moment that Shakopee's Park Department hadn't heard about it. Although we talked with many people, but
Sure.
they hadn't talked to each other,
Yep.
and so we stopped it. And then it's like, okay, so we'll do it this year. Well, yeah, and we had real problems with where to put the sediment. You have to make sure doesn't have pollutants in it, and that took a long time. So it all dragged on, and it's like, okay, finally we can get out there, and then we have this
And the
thaw.
weather doesn't cooperate.
Yes, and so who knows? This might be it, which also means we're not able to do any more seining through the ice for
Yeah,
carp. We're
that's
going to
true.
have to go in open water, but that's going to be a while.
Yeah.
Before we get that. So we're going to continue on with the carp management program as well, the flood program. The lower prior projects, we're going to do an analysis of where we're at with the total maximum daily load limits that were set by the Pollution Control Agency and Environmental Protection Agency that we did with you. We put together plans that said, we're going to have to get these numbers down, and we're going to do a check-in. So how are we doing with that? You know, do we need to do more projects? Do we need to apply for more grants to do those?
Gotcha.
So yeah, so there's a lot of
work to be done, isn't there?
Absolutely,
More work
yes.
than you can possibly get accomplished
Right,
in the time available with the resources.
Right.
So, property owners, and let's talk about kind of typical Prior Lake property owners, if there is such a thing. What kinds of things can they do to lend a hand so they're not part of the problem, and in fact are helping with these
Right.
solutions? Because it sounds like the only way you do this is chip,
Yeah.
big and small, or
Yeah.
small and medium.
Right. Well, glad that you asked that. We have a new program, which is the Water Quality Improvement Award. And we just started this last year. We have a Citizens Advisory Committee, which is required by law. And they are advisory to the Board of Managers, and they are kind of our education and outreach arm. And we meet with them once a year, or once a month. And two of the active members came up with this idea. Let's give an incentive to people to do the right thing.
Catch them doing something right?
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing.
And encourage them to put rain gardens in. Encourage them to put pervious pavement in, rain barrels, whatever else that's out there. There's some little things that you can do that make a difference to kind of hold that water back so it doesn't take all the pollutants into the lake. Right. And we had 4 winners last year, which we were excited about. And the Citizens Advisory Committee was so pleased with the program that they're doing it again this year. And if people go on our website, I know you're putting that up as we talk,
Yes.
they can find out more information about the Water Quality Improvement Award. And this year, we have a $500 award to 4 people, or 4 families. And it's a bigger incentive. Last year we had 100. So yeah, we want people to do that. There are so many things out there they can do. We also have a cost share program with the Soil and Water Conservation District that provides incentives to do shoreline restoration. One of the things, unfortunately, I found out the other day was that the Pollution Control Agency is now measuring the impact of chlorides in water. And I know Prior Lake has done a great job of being very at the forefront of doing management so that there's not excess chlorides that can end up in the water and stay in the water. But the other piece is that they're also looking at, they call it biota, which are the critters in the water, like macroinvertebrates that you can't see with the naked eye, these little tiny things that to help you determine if the water quality is good, but also fish. And we found out we are one of 8 lakes in the metro area where for Lower Prior Lake, we ranked very low as far as fish diversity. And I was like, no, wait a minute. We've got really good water quality there.
That's strange.
Why? And
Intuitively doesn't.
It doesn't fit. No. And the Pollution Control Agency person that was presenting the findings said because the shoreline is so built up. And so if more people could have a more natural shoreline with native vegetation that's planted. I know that people like their shoreline to be able to get out, but there's ways that you can have both. And our programs with the Soil and Water Conservation District come up usually quarterly. They can look on our website or the conservation districts and see when they're happening. We just had a prairie workshop here yesterday, and I understand it was very well attended. People can do that kind of thing. They can, even if they have a city lot, they can put it in prairie. I don't know what your ordinances are. They have to comply with those, but they can do different things on their property to make it better. Turf, unfortunately, does not help in water storage and help keep the nutrients back. It really
puts the nutrients right in there.
Exactly. Yeah, and people put nutrients on there and then they run right into the lake. So they can do that. They can be more cognizant of their own actions. And I know sometimes the problems seem so big and you go, well, what can I do? Well, you can do a lot. If everybody did their part, we wouldn't have a lot of these problems that we have to deal with. So, big problems that take a long time to resolve, if you can resolve them ever. But if you've got, little problems and you can keep them little, then you're really much further ahead.
So if people can, instead of having the old traditional, it's got to be sand from here to here, could diversify a little bit, put in some natural plantings. and maybe some sand and maybe rain garden sorts of things,
Yes.
they could help immensely.
They could.
And they don't think that that's the case.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. Something else too that people on Spring Lake might not like to hear, but they have a lot of cattails, and periodically you'll have a piece that breaks off, and it's called a bog.
Ah, the old bog.
The old bogs,
Yes.
yes. And we've asked our colleagues from other watershed districts, what do you do about the bogs? And they go like that. Yeah, well, you know, somebody else has got to take care of that. We're not
Right.
going to take care of it. And we've been working with you and Spring Lake Township as well as the county to put a policy together on how to deal with them. But ultimately, the Department of Natural Resources says, if you could let that bog just anchor on your shoreline, that would be a good thing.
Oh, so
And-
instant.
Yes, exactly.
Instant solution.
Right, instant solution. And
Maybe
it's
we'll
gonna,
get people out there cutting them off and throwing them over.
that
We're
I
going to have a
doubt.
contest for that. Biggest bog.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, the only entity that's allowed to do that is the Scott County Sheriff's Office.
So don't take my advice and blame me for it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if they do that, have a more natural shoreline. If they try to keep the water on their land, use more native species, use rain gardens.
Right.
There are just a lot of things out there that they can do, and so they feel like they're a part of the solution
Sure.
rather than part of the problem.
And your website is loaded with different
We
ideas.
have- yes.
And if they want more, I'm guessing you can
Yeah.
talk to your staff and
Absolutely,
you
we'd be
have a
happy
whole
to help.
variety of things.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're right here in Prior Lake City Hall.
We
so
are in downstairs.
people can't say they don't know where you are.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yes.
Are there other things, Diane, that we should be talking about or should have covered along the way as we talked a little bit
Well,
about
I
this?
think we've covered the waterfront, so
Boy,
to
I'll
speak.
tell you. There you go. Yeah. Just a very information-rich program. I
Yeah.
appreciate you being with us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for the
You bet.
information. And we have got the information, your contact information. We've been running it on kind of a ticker tape below here, so people should know how to be in touch with you.
Great. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks for joining us. We hope the information that you glean from these programs is useful to you as a resident in the Prior Lake area. Until next time, I'm Frank Boyle saying, have a great day.